The air in the master bedroom of Blackwood Estate does not circulate. It stagnates. It accumulates, layer upon invisible layer, pressing down on the grand four-poster bed like a physical weight, holding me in place more effectively than my paralysis ever could. It smells of endings here. There is the cloying, powdery sweetness of lavender potpourri, a scent I once loved, but which has now turned stale, mimicking the odor of something preserved too long in a dark drawer. Beneath that, acting as a sharp, chemical undercurrent, is the stinging bite of rubbing alcohol and antiseptic wipes. It is the perfume of the infirm, the olfactory uniform of the dying. I lay perfectly still, my eyes tracing the intricate plaster molding on the ceiling for the 1000th time today. To my right, the machine acts as my metronome. Hiss, click, hiss, click. The rhythm is relentless, a synthetic lung breathing for me when my own chest feels too heavy to rise. It pushes cool, dry oxygen through the cannula, drying out my sinuses, reminding me with every mechanical cycle that I am tethered to this world by plastic tubing and electricity. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn tight, a wall of midnight blue plush that successfully banishes the midday sun. I know it is bright outside. I can feel the heat radiating against the glass, trying to force its way in. But in here, it is a perpetual, dim twilight. A single beam of light has managed to find a gap in the fabric, slicing through the gloom like a laser. I watch the dust motes dancing in that shaft of illumination. They swirl in chaotic, silent turbulence, suspended in the air. I struggle to breathe. They are like memories, I suppose, fragments of the past that only become visible when the light hits them just right. My body is a lie. That is the first thing you must understand. To the casual observer, and there will be many of those soon enough, I am a tragedy in silk pajamas. I am Martha Blackwood, the matriarch reduced to a withered husk, a collection of brittle bones and translucent skin wrapped in expensive linen. They look at my hands, resting motionless on the duvet, spotted with age and trembling with what they assume is palsy. They see a vessel that is emptying out. They are wrong. Inside this decaying architecture, behind eyes that I deliberately keep half-lidded and glassy, there is a fire that has not gone out. It is a burning coal of resentment, hot and bright. My mind is not withered. It is sharper than it has been in decades. It has been honed by silence, whetted by the hours of observation. I am not fading away. I am waiting. I refuse to die a victim in my own house, surrounded by the vultures who call themselves my family. Is it done? I ask. My voice is a rasp, dry as autumn leaves, but the words are precise. Mr. Abernathy sits in the wingback chair by my bedside. He has been my attorney for 40 years, and in that time, he has aged alongside me, turning from a sharp-suited shark into this gray, stoic gargoyle. He does not look at me with pity. That is why I kept him. The document is prepared, Martha, he says softly. Are you certain? Give me the pen. He leans forward, the leather of his briefcase creaking a sound of business in a room of sickness. He places the document on the bedside table. It is thick, cream-colored bond paper, heavy stock, the deed of gift. Even the title sounds innocent, doesn't it? A gift, generosity. But we both know it is a weapon. I reach out. My hand shakes, not from weakness, though I let Abernathy think so. No, this tremor is pure adrenaline. It is the electric charge of a gambler placing everything on a single number. I grip the fountain pen. It is cold, heavy, substantial. I lower the nib to the paper. The sound is visceral in the quiet room, a wet, scratching tear as the metal bites into the fiber. Scritch, scratch. It sounds like a knife carving into bone. I sign my name, Martha E. Blackwood. The ink flows black and permanent, bleeding slightly into the grain of the paper. With this signature, I am not just transferring assets. I am severing a timeline. I am cutting the strings that have held my children to me. Strings they thought were made of gold, but were actually made of greed. I cap the pen. The click is final. Take it, I whisper, pushing the paper toward him. Hide it. It will be filed within the hour, Abernathy promises, sliding the document into the dark maw of his briefcase. Then, I hear it. The sound is faint at first, muffled by the heavy curtains, but unmistakable to a woman who has spent years listening for it. Tires crushing gravel. The distinct, arrogant crunch of a heavy luxury sedan rolling up the long driveway. The engine cuts, followed by the heavy thud of car doors slamming shut. The vultures have arrived. My pulse quickens, beating a frantic drum against my ribs. Richard and Elena, my son and daughter, they are here for the performance. They are here to hold my hand, to dab at dry eyes, to check the settings on the oxygen machine, and to mentally calculate the square footage of this estate while I am still drawing breath in it. They are early, Abernathy notes, snapping his briefcase locks shut. They smell blood, I reply, sinking back into the pillows, adjusting my mask of frailty. I let my eyelids droop. I slacken my jaw. I prepare the stage. Let them perform their play. Arthur, I have already written the ending. We wait in the silence, to conspirators in the dim light. The heavy oak door to the bedroom acts as a barrier, holding back the inevitable. I watch the brass handle. It begins to turn, slowly, twisting with a metallic groan. The latch clicks. The door creaks open, slicing a wedge of bright, artificial hallway light into my sanctuary, bringing with it the nauseating sound of performative, false cheered out as their shadows stretch across the floorboards toward my bed. I wonder, do they have any idea that they just walked into a trap? The atmosphere in the room shifts instantly, violently. It is no longer a sanctuary of dust and silence. It has been invaded. Richard and Elena do not walk into a room so much as they occupy it, consuming the available space with a suffocating sense of entitlement. The first thing that hits me is not their voices, but their scent. It is a sensory assault. The stale, safe odor of my lavender potpourri is obliterated by a wave of aggressive fragrance. Elena is wearing that heavy, floral Chanel she knows I despise, a scent that clings to the back of the throat like syrup. Richard smells of expensive sandalwood cologne and the faint, acrid temps of cigar smoke clinging to his wool suit. These are the scents of the living, of the vibrant, of the world outside that has moved on without me. In this hermetically sealed sickroom, their perfumes are not pleasant. They are pollutants. They mask the smell of my mortality with the stench of their vanity. They hover. That is the only word for it. They do not sit immediately. They circle the bed, their eyes darting around the room, landing on objects rather than on me. They remind me of carrion birds, sleek and well-groomed, circling a carcass that hasn't quite had the decency to stop twitching yet. Mother, Richard says. His voice is a rich baritone, practiced and smooth, the kind of voice that closes deals in boardrooms. He steps closer, looming over the bed. He places a hand on the footboard, mahogany 18th century end. I see his thumb rub against the grain, testing the finish. You're looking rested. The nurse said you had a difficult night, Elena adds. She drifts toward the antique vanity in the corner. Her movements are fluid, predatory. She reaches out, her manicured fingers hovering over the cluttered surface before landing on a string of South Sea pearls I left there days ago. She runs the cool, milky gems through her fingers, weighing them. Does she remember, Richard? She promised these to me for my 40th. She said they were to be an heirloom. Focused, Elena, Richard snaps. Though his tone lacks any real reprimand, he turns his attention to the bay window, where the velvet curtains are pulled tight. It's freezing in here. The insulation in this wing is atrocious. We'll need to replace these frames entirely once things are settled. Double pane, perhaps. Better for the resale value. Once things are settled, the phrase hangs in the air, suspended in the dust motes. I say nothing. I let my head loll to the side, my eyes fluttering shut as if the effort of remaining conscious is too great. But behind the curtain of my lashes, my mind is traveling back. Richard's voice, that tone of inconvenienced concern triggers a memory, so sharp it cuts through the fog of my medication. It was 3 years ago, the garden. I can still feel the damp chill of the earth seeping into my hip. I had slipped on the wet flagstones near the rose trellis. The pain was blinding, a white-hot spike that nailed me to the ground. I lay there for an hour, the autumn rain beginning to drizzle, mixing with the tears of frustration on my face. When I finally managed to pull my phone from my pocket with trembling hands, I called Richard first. He answered on the second ring. I told him I had fallen. I told him I couldn't get up. Mother, is it an emergency? He had asked. There was no panic in his voice, only a sigh of irritation. I'm on the back nine. We have a tea time in 10 minutes with the investors from Tokyo. Can't you call the gardener? Or, Elena? The silence on the line had been deafening. He wasn't worried about my broken bones. He was worried about his handicap. He was worried about the optics of leaving a business meeting for an old woman who should have been more careful. I snapped back to the present. Richard is now standing over me, adjusting the blanket with a show of tenderness that makes my skin crawl. The contrast between the son who left me in the mud and the son who now smooths my duvet is nauseating. He is performing for an audience of one, himself. He needs to believe he is the dutiful son, just as he needs to believe the inheritance is his birthright. She's out, Richard says, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The morphine, probably. Good, Elena replies. I hear the click of the vanity drawer opening. She is snooping. Did you speak to the auction house? I have a meeting with Christie's on Tuesday, Richard murmurs. He moves away from the bed, and I hear the scuff of his shoes on the hardwood as he walks toward the fireplace. They're interested in the art collection, obviously. The Turners alone will cover the estate tax, but the furniture, this bedroom suite is massive. It might be harder to move. Don't sell the jewelry in the lot, Elena hisses. I want the pearls, and the emerald choker. The rest can go. We liquidate everything, Elena. That was the agreement. We split the cash, 50-50. Don't start getting sentimental about trinkets now. I lie perfectly still, forcing my breathing to remain shallow and rhythmic. The pain blooming in my chest has nothing to do with my failing heart. It is a different kind of ignicult, precise and absolute. It is the realization that to them, I am already gone. I am not a mother, a mentor, or even a person. I am an obstacle. I am a warehouse manager who refuses to hand over the keys to the inventory. They aren't discussing my funeral arrangements. They aren't worrying about my comfort. They are mentally stripping the wallpaper. They are calculating the weight of the silver in the dining room. They are liquidating my life while I am still warm enough to hear them do it. A single tear leaks from the corner of my eye. I let it slide into the pillow, unseen. It is not a tear of sadness. It is a tear of mourning for the children I thought I raised, and the final confirmation that the document in Mr. Abernathy's briefcase was not an act of spite, it was an act of justice. Do you think she suspects? Elena asks, her voice barely audible over the hiss of the oxygen machine. Suspects what? Richard scoffs. Look at her, Elle. She doesn't even know what day it is. She's a vegetable. We just have to wait for the clock to run out. I keep my eyes closed, listening to the sound of them divvying up my kingdom. But as Richard laughs softly, a chilling thought strikes me, one that makes my adrenaline spike again. They are waiting for the clock to run out, but how patient are they willing to be? The library has always been the heart of Blackwood Manor. It is a room of dark mahogany and leather, smelling of old paper, binding glue, and the accumulated wisdom of 3 generations. But this morning, at 10 o'clock, it smells of something else entirely. It smells of premature victory. As my nurse, a sturdy woman named Clara, with hands like rough sandpaper, wheels me into the room. The first thing I hear is the crystalline chime of a toast. Clink. It is a delicate, musical sound, but to my ears, it beats like a war drum. Richard and Elena are lounging in the wing-back chairs near the fireplace, bathed in the streaming morning sunlight. They look golden, successful, and utterly relaxed. On the small table between them sits a bottle of my 1982 Chateau Margaux. It is breathing in a crystal decanter, the dark ruby liquid swirling as Richard pours himself a generous second glass. They aren't just drinking wine, they are drinking my blood. They have raided the cellar before my body is even cold, uncorking a fortune to celebrate. The windfall, they believe, is imminent. They look up as the rubber tires of my wheelchair crunch softly over the Persian rug. For a split second, I see the annoyance in their eyes, the intrusion of the grim reality into their fantasy of wealth. Then, the masks slide back into place. Mother, Richard says, standing up. He doesn't put down the wine glass. He swirls it, the liquid clinging to the sides, thick and rich. We didn't expect you up so soon. We were just toasting to your health. The lie is so blatant it is almost insulting. I imagine my health is the last thing you are drinking to. Richard, I say. My voice is quiet, steadier than yesterday, fueled by the cold fury that has settled in my marrow. Mr. Abernathy is already there. He stands by the fireplace, his back to the cold hearth, his briefcase resting on the mantel like a judge's gavel. He does not have a glass. He looks at me, gives a barely perceptible nod, and waits. We need to talk business, Mother, Richard continues, pacing slightly, his energy nervous and manic. He gestures to a stack of papers on the low table. Elena and I have been discussing the logistics of the estate. With your condition, with the medication making things foggy. We think it's best if we execute a durable power of attorney today. Immediately, actually. Elena chimes in, her voice syrupy sweet, leaning forward so her diamond pendant catches the light. It's just to make things easier for you, Mama, so you don't have to worry about bills or the staff. We can handle the burden. We can manage the assets, liquidate the empire. I look at Mr. Abernathy, Arthur, the single word cuts through Richard's monologue like a guillotine blade. The lawyer steps forward. He does not open a file. He does not shuffle papers. He reaches into his breast pocket and withdraws a single, folded document. The movement is precise, practiced, and terrifyingly calm. There will be no need for a power of attorney, Richard Abernathy says. His voice is devoid of emotion, a dry wind blowing across a desert. Nor will there be any management of assets by either you or your sister. Richard laughs a sharp, barking sound. What are you talking about, Arthur? She's incompetent. She can't manage this place alone. She won't have to, Abernathy replies. He unfolds the document. The cream-colored bond paper catches the light. I see my signature at the bottom, the ink darkened final. As of 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon, the Blackwood Estate ceased to exist as a private holding. The room goes silent. It is a vacuum of sound. The dust motes seem to freeze in the air. Even the grandfather clock in the corner seems to hold its breath. Excuse me, Elena asks, her smile faltering, twitching at the corners. I don't understand. It is a deed of gift, Abernathy clarifies, his eyes locking onto Richard's. Your mother has transferred the title of the manor, the entire investment portfolio, the art collection, and the land rights to the St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital. The transaction is complete. The deed is filed. The tax benefits are ... substantial. The silence stretches, pulling tight until it hums with tension. I watch them process it. It is like watching a building collapse in slow motion. First, the foundation cracks, the confusion, then, the walls buckle, the denial. Elena lets out a high, fractured giggle. That's not funny, Arthur. She's senile. She doesn't know what she signed. You can't be serious. I assure you, Elena, I have never been more serious. And Martha was deemed of sound mind by 2 independent witnesses and her physician prior to the signing. Richard's face transforms. The golden tan flushes a deep, violaceous purple. The vein in his neck, the one that always bulged when he didn't get his way as a child, begins to pulse rhythmically. He drops the crystal glass. Crash. The sound is explosive in the quiet library. Shards of crystal explode outward, sending a spray of priceless red wine across the Persian rug, looking for all the world like a splatter of arterial blood. You gave away my inheritance, Richard screams, the sound tears out of his throat, raw and primal. He isn't looking at the lawyer anymore. He's looking at me. His eyes are wide, white-rimmed, filled with a hatred so pure it feels like heat radiation. You, crazy old hag, you gave away my money. I look at him. I do not flinch. I do not look away. I sit up straighter in my wheelchair, the frailty falling away like a discarded shawl. I gave away my money, Richard, I say. My voice is not a whisper now. It is steel. It is the voice of the woman who built this empire while he was playing tennis. You were sitting in this room, drinking my wine, waiting for a corpse. You were so busy counting the coins on my eyes that you forgot the person underneath was still breathing. I'll sue, Richard roars, stepping over the broken glass, moving toward me. His hands are clenched into fists. I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll overturn it. You can't do this to us. It is done, I reply, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm, and there is nothing you can do to undo it. Richard lunges. He stops just short of the wheelchair, his breathing ragged, his chest heaving. The smell of the spilled wine mixes with the scent of his expensive cologne, creating a nauseating bouquet of ruin. He leans down, his face inches from mine, and for the first time in my life, I do not see my son. I see a stranger, a desperate, dangerous stranger who has just lost everything. He whispers, low and venomous. You think you've won, Mother. You think this is over. You're still in this house. You're still weak. And accidents happen to old women all the time. As he straightens up, wiping a speck of wine from his cheek, I realize with a jolt of ice-cold terror, I may have saved my soul. But have I just signed my death warrant?
The exit of my children was not a departure. It was a detonation. Richard's threat hung in the air for only a heartbeat before the reality of his impotence crashed down upon him. He didn't strike me. He didn't speak again. He simply unraveled. He spun on his heel, his Italian leather shoes grinding into the shards of the crystal wineglass he had shattered, grinding the red stain deeper into the wool of the rug. They fled the library as if the room itself were on fire. I heard their voices retreating down the long, vaulted hallway, a cacophony of screeching recriminations. Elena was sobbing, a high, thin sound of materialized greed turning to ash. She was shouting about lawsuits, about undue influence, about how I had robbed her of a lifestyle she had never earned. Richard was bellowing at someone on his phone, presumably his own lawyer, demanding immediate injunctions that I knew, and he knew, would never be granted. The heavy front door of Blackwood Manor slammed shut with a force that shook the floorboards beneath my wheelchair. It was a thunderclap of finality. Then came the aggressive roar of engines, tires spinning violently on the loose gravel of the driveway, spitting stones as they sped away toward the main road, back to the city, back to their debts and their hollow pretenses. And then silence returned. But it was not the same silence that had suffocated me yesterday. The air in the library no longer felt stagnant or heavy. The oppressive weight of the velvet curtains, the suffocating history of the books, the demanding stare of the portraits, it had all evaporated. The house had held its breath for 40 years, waiting for the vultures to pick it clean. Now it exhaled. I looked at Mr. Abernathy. He was still standing by the fireplace, his posture unchanged, a sentinel of order in the midst of chaos. He reached into his pocket, retrieved a pristine white handkerchief, and slowly wiped a speck of wine from his lapel. "Well," he said, his voice returning to its usual dry, measured cadence, "that went about as expected." "Better, I think," I replied. My voice felt strange to my own ears, lighter, younger. "They didn't take the silver." A faint, rare smile tugged at the corner of the lawyer's mouth. "I believe they were too distracted by the loss of the millions to notice the cutlery." I looked down at my hands. They were still the hands of an old woman, spotted, veined, trembling slightly. But the tremors were no longer born of adrenaline or fear. They were just the vibrations of a machine that had been running at redline capacity and was now finally, mercifully, winding down. The fear of death, which had sat on my chest like a goblin for months, had vanished. Why? Because I was no longer prey. I was no longer a vault to be cracked or a carcass to be divided. I was just Martha. I had emptied the treasury. There was nothing left for them to hunt. "Arthur," I said softly, "open the curtains." He moved to the window, pulling back the heavy velvet drapes. The light that flooded in was not the harsh glare of the sun, but the soft, gray bruised light of an approaching storm. As if on cue, the first drops began to fall. I watched them hit the glass, fat, heavy drops that streaked down the pane, distorting the view of the driveway where my children had just sped away. The rain fell harder, a sudden, cleansing deluge. It drummed against the roof and lashed against the stone walls. I could almost smell it through the glass, the scent of ozone, of wet earth, of dust being washed away. It was the smell of a clean slate. "The Street Jude's administrators will be here on Monday to begin the inventory," Abernathy said, watching the rain. "They plan to turn the East Wing into a recovery center. The gardens will be replanted for the patients." "Good," I nodded. I looked around the library. For years, these books, these statues, this real estate had been a burden. They were the golden chains that bound my children to me in a toxic dance of expectation. Now, they were just objects again, or rather, they were seeds. I wasn't leaving behind a fortune to be snorted or gambled away. I was leaving a sanctuary for children who actually needed a future. "Clara," I called out. The nurse appeared in the doorway, looking wide-eyed and terrified, clearly having overheard the screaming match. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood. Are you all right? Do you need your oxygen?" "No, Clara," I said, inhaling a deep breath of the room's new, lighter air. "I don't need the oxygen. I need a cup of tea, Earl Grey, hot, and bring a cup for Mr. Abernathy." "Yes, ma'am." She scurried away. I turned my wheelchair slightly to the left. There, leaning against the wainscoting, was the Turner painting, a magnificent seascape of a storm-tossed ship. Richard had taken it down from the wall earlier, setting it on the floor to check the back for authentication marks, mentally calculating its auction price. Now, it sat there, abandoned on the Persian rug, irrelevant to him, because he couldn't cash it in. It looked better there, I thought, less like a trophy, more like art. They wanted the gold, Arthur, I murmured, watching the rain blur the world outside into a watercolor painting. But they never understood the weight of it. It drags you down. It drowns you. I closed my eyes, listening to the rhythm of the rain, feeling a profound, quiet joy spreading through my chest, warmer than any brandy. I leave this world light as a feather, I whispered. Abernathy said nothing, merely nodding as he watched the storm wash the world clean. And in the silence of the library, with the empty space on the wall staring back at us, I finally smiled, a genuine, peaceful curving of the lips that I hadn't worn in years. The play was over, the stage was dark, and for the first time, I was free. Secrets have a way of surfacing, don't they? If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to my channel. I have many more locked away in this library, waiting for you.